From ancient kingdoms and Red Sea trade routes to Italian colonization, hard-won independence, and a culture shaped by faith and resilience, Eritrea's story is unlike any other. So in this video, we're breaking it all down. The history, the land, the politics, and the people who've shaped it all. And here's how it all began. By 338 AD, Christianity had reached the city, and just a few centuries later, in 615 AD, Islam arrived as well. And because of the region's unique position at the crossroads of Africa and the Middle East, Eritrea became a vital trade route in as early as the first millennium BC. But Eritrea's strategic location has always been a double-edged sword, because as you know, with wealth and access usually came conflict. This means foreign powers and regional empires competed fiercely for control of this valuable corridor. And that struggle would continue for centuries, ultimately paving the way for Italy's colonization in 1890. Well, technically, Italy's involvement in the country started in 1869, when an Italian monk bought land in Assab on behalf of an Italian shipping company. But by 1882, that land had been sold to the Italian government. Then in 1885, Italy seized the port of Massawa, and by January 1st, 1890, Eritrea was officially declared an Italian colony. Italy wasted no time expanding its influence inland. As it pushed forward with plans for a settler colony, it met resistance from Eritreans and neighbouring powers. But through military force, diplomacy, and political manoeuvring, Italy eventually solidified its rule. But colonial power doesn't last forever, and for Eritrea, the next chapter would begin with a dramatic shift in World War II. Because in 1941, British forces defeated the Italians at the Battle of Keren and took control of Eritrea. Then, on April 1st, 1941, Asmara was captured, and Eritrea fell under British military administration. But this was meant to be temporary, just until the Allied powers decided its fate after the war. Instead of preparing Eritrea for self-rule, the British followed a caretaker policy designed to keep the country weak and divided. Industries were dismantled or relocated to Kenya. Machinery was destroyed, and even the railway system was partially dismantled. Worse still, the British proposed splitting Eritrea between Ethiopia and Sudan, breaking the earlier promise of self-determination. That betrayal would fuel the next wave of political tension. So what did the world decide to do with Eritrea after World War II? While the UN granted independence to Libya and Somalia, Eritrea's fate was left unresolved. By 1949, a UN commission was tasked with finding out what Eritreans actually wanted, and most called for full independence. However, Western powers had other interests, because in 1950, the UN forced Eritrea into a federation with Ethiopia as a way to gain military access to the country. And by 1962, Ethiopia's emperor dissolved the agreement and annexed Eritrea entirely. And this annexation ignited one of the longest armed struggles in Africa's history. Eritrea's fight for independence began on September 3rd, 1961, when peaceful demands for autonomy were shut down. This then prompted a group of fighters to take up arms and spark a revolution. Outnumbered, outgunned, and facing extreme terrain and famine, Eritreans continued their fight. Yes, their enemy had more weapons, a larger population, and the support from global powers, but you know what Eritreans had that was more powerful than all of that? It's their will to be free. And so the battle continued, and the war spanned 3 decades. In 1991, the Eritrean People's Liberation Front captured Asmara, effectively ending the war. 2 years later, a national referendum confirmed Eritrea's independence. After that, Eritrea's provisional government began rebuilding infrastructure, creating systems of governance, and preparing for statehood. In 1993, after a national referendum, Eritrea officially became a sovereign nation. Self-reliance has been Eritrea's guiding principle ever since, which means the country has avoided foreign debt and focused on homegrown development. Popular participation has played a key role in everything from infrastructure to healthcare and education. And you can really see how much has changed in the country. For starters, it's made big moves to support women's rights and promote gender equality. Water and food security have also improved dramatically. Just think, back in 1991, Eritrea had fewer than 100 reservoirs. Now there are over 900, which means about 95% of the population has access to safe drinking water. And when it comes to healthcare, More than 80% of people in rural areas live within just 3 miles of a health facility. Also, infant immunisation rates are above 95%, and maternal mortality has gone down significantly. And then there's education. Elementary school is not only free, it's also mandatory. On top of that, the government has built 7 colleges throughout the country to boost access to higher education and support regional development. So against the odds, Eritrea continues to chart its own path. But to truly understand how this nation has endured and evolved, you have to look at the land itself. Because in Eritrea, geography isn't just a backdrop, it's a driving force in the country's story. Let me ask you this. Have you ever wondered how a country's geography could shape its destiny? Well, in Eritrea's case, the answer is completely. Because this isn't just a strip of land on the Horn of Africa, it's a crossroads of cultures, empires, and natural extremes. And once you see the map, everything starts to make sense. Eritrea sits in northeastern Africa, bordered by Sudan to the west, Ethiopia to the south, Djibouti to the southeast, and the Red Sea to the east. At a glance, its land area, around 125,000 square kilometres, or nearly 50,000 square miles, might not seem all that massive. But here's what you probably don't know. It's actually larger than 20 other African countries and over 100 nations around the world. And then there's the coastline, stretching for 1,155 kilometres, or 717 miles. Eritrea has the longest shoreline along the Red Sea among all the coastal countries. That's a big deal, not just for trade, but for history, identity, and power. In fact, the Red Sea has played such a huge role in shaping Eritrea's past that even its name traces back to the Greek word for it, Erythra Thalassa, or Red Sea. So long before it was known as Eritrea, this land was referred to as the land of Punt, or the land of the gods. Later, in the Middle Ages, it was called Medri Bahri, which literally means land of the sea. But this country isn't just about coastlines. Its landscape is as diverse as its history. So let's zoom in on the coast itself. You'll find dry, desert-like conditions, stretches of sandy beaches, and rocky cliffs. Off the shore, you've got the Dahlak Archipelago, a cluster of small islands rich in marine life and history. From there, the land climbs sharply into the eastern escarpment, a dramatic mix of cliffs and valleys. It's cooler up here, a bit greener, and feels like a completely different world compared to the coast. Keep going inland, and you'll hit the Central Highlands, which is considered Eritrea's beating heart. This is where most people live, and it's also where you'll find Asmara, the capital, sitting pretty at around 2,300 metres, or 7,500 feet above sea level. Typically, the highlands are temperate, more fertile, and have long been home to ancient civilizations and cultural hubs. Then, to the west, the land dips again into the western lowlands, vast semi-arid plains that stretch towards Sudan. It's hot, dry, and sparsely populated, but it has its own rhythm and beauty, especially when the sun sets over the open Sahel. And then there's the Danakil Depression in the southeast, one of the hottest places on Earth. Seriously, it can hit over 122 degrees Fahrenheit, or 50 degrees Celsius. It's a land of volcanic craters, salt flats, and surreal landscapes. Harsh? Absolutely. But geologically fascinating? Even more so. Beyond all the terrain and climate zones, Eritrea's position matters. A lot. Because sitting right across from the Arabian Peninsula and near key maritime routes, it connects Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. So, all in all, it's not just about where Eritrea is. It's about what that location means to the rest of the world. And if you think its geography is impressive, wait until you see how this land has shaped Eritrea's role in global politics. Because when it comes to geopolitics, Eritrea is small, but never overlooked. Since gaining independence from Ethiopia in 1991 after a grueling 30-year war, Eritrea has charted a path that's been anything but conventional. In 1993, Eritreans voted almost unanimously for independence in a UN-supervised referendum, officially making it a sovereign nation. But what many hoped would be the beginning of democratic growth never quite materialised. The People's Front for Democracy and Justice, or PFDJ for short, has been the only legal political party in the country ever since. President Isaias Afwerki, who was elected by the National Assembly following the war, has remained in power for over 3 decades. So while a constitution was drafted and ratified in 1997, it was never really implemented. And the first and only parliamentary election that was supposed to happen in 2001 is still on hold. As of now, Eritrea is governed entirely by presidential decree, with no functioning legislature, no independent judiciary, and no national elections. And that has serious consequences. Many Eritreans, especially the youth, have fled the country, risking dangerous crossings, harsh refugee conditions and uncertain futures, all to escape indefinite military service and a system that suppresses dissent. Those who stay behind live in a tightly controlled environment where freedom of expression, movement and assembly are severely restricted. But even abroad, Eritreans haven't given up. In the diaspora, opposition groups, many led by young people who recently fled, are organising, advocating and pushing for change. Some call for reform from within, others demand full regime change, but nearly all agree the path forward is full of uncertainty. And any change, peaceful or otherwise, could have massive implications for the country's stability and sovereignty. But all this political tension isn't just limited to its government. It has economic consequences too. Right now, GDP growth is expected to reach around $2 billion, $130 million by the end of 2025. And while there's some hope for long-term gains, possibly up to $2 billion, $250 million by 2027, those numbers are still among the lowest in Africa. What's more, most of the growth comes from just one sector, mining. Projects like the Kaluli potash mine, heavily backed by Chinese investment, offer some short-term promise. But outside of mining, investment is scarce, largely because of Eritrea's unpredictable political environment. So the next question is, where does it go from here? To understand that, we have to look beyond politics and policy and into something deeper, culture. Because if there's one thing that defines Eritrea more than its borders or its leadership, it's its people. Even though it's considered a small country, Eritrea is incredibly diverse. About 3,700,000 people live here. And what stands out immediately is just how young the population is. Ethnically, Eritrea is a mosaic. The Tigrinya and Tigray groups make up the majority, accounting for over half of the population. Then you have other ethnic groups like the Saho, Bilen and Nara, followed by smaller communities such as the Afar, Bejar, Kunama and Rashida. And when it comes to language, Eritrea doesn't have just one or two, it's got several. Tigrinya, Tigray and Arabic are widely used in business and government, but each ethnic group has its own way of speaking, many of which are used in primary education and local communication. Arabic is the most commonly spoken foreign language, with dialects like Sudanese and Hijazi Arabic heard throughout the country. Altogether, Eritreans speak everything from Beja to Afar to Nilo-Saharan dialects, making the linguistic landscape just as rich as the geography. Religion is another big part of Eritrean identity. The population is roughly split between Christianity and Islam. Most Christians belong to the Eritrean Orthodox Tewahedo Church, while others are Catholic or Protestant, a legacy of Italian colonization and missionary influence, especially among groups like the Kunama. On the other hand, most Muslims live along the eastern coast, the western plains and the northern parts of the plateau. Farmers tend to be Christian, while pastoralist communities are often Muslim. That said, in cities and towns, these communities mix and interact in markets, neighbourhoods and daily life. Now, speaking of daily life, coffee is huge here. Not just as a drink, but as a ritual. Eritreans take their coffee ceremonies seriously. The beans are roasted over hot coals, ground fresh, brewed in a clay pot called a jebana, and served in rounds, often with incense burning nearby. It's a moment to slow down, talk and bond, whether you're celebrating or just having a guest over. Which leads us to food. Much like its history, food in Eritrea reflects its past and its neighbours. The cuisine is very similar to Ethiopian food, with injera, a spongy flatbread, being the base of most meals. It's often paired with spicy meat stews like sebi or vegetarian dishes like shiro. Additionally, meals are usually shared, eaten from one platter, and scooped up using pieces of bread instead of utensils. With these, you'll notice how their sense of community is so strong. That's why family is central in Eritrean life. While most families live in nuclear units, many ethnic groups still maintain extended family structures. And raising children? It's not just a family affair, it brings the whole community together. Aunts, uncles, neighbours, everyone plays a role. So you know that old saying, it takes a village to raise a child? Well, it's still very true here. That said, with everything you've learned, what part of Eritrea's story stood out to you the most? Let me know in the comments section below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, you'll love this next one.